So I was just trying to think about how long I've known you. And you're one of those people who, so I know a lot of founders, a lot of Black founders, but you're one of those people that I just feel like I've always known you. So I have no like reference point for when we met, how we met. It just Morgan always was.
Okay. You can hear me now. That's so funny. It's so true, right?
Yeah.
So I am a St. Louis native from Washington, or I'm from St. Louis. I went to Washington University in St. Louis. And when I graduated, I moved out to Silicon Valley, but I lived in Mountain View, which was a mistake for me personally, because I was like, whoa, where am I? Like, so coming from St. Louis, right, where the majority of the population is Black, and then moving to Mountain View, which is predominantly not Black.
Yeah.
And then I was working at Intuit at the time as a product manager and doing a rotational program throughout different parts of the company. And so I didn't make it up to San Francisco at all, but I remember like lurking on Black founders, like, okay, what's happening? I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur full time.
Yeah.
I was just figuring out what that looked like for me, and what was kind of the dream that I was willing to be super broke for a very long time.
Yes.
and sacrifice. So I think we met when I moved from one of my rotations up into the city. So I moved from DC to San Francisco while still working at Intuit, and then we were on Montgomery at Minna Gallery at one of the Black founder events. I think that's the first time we met.
Okay, and then when did the Blavity idea come about? How did you go from working as an employee at Intuit to I'm going to start this amazing media company and blow it up? When did that happen?
Yeah, so let's see. So July 2014 is when we launched publicly. So I have 3 co-founders, Jonathan, Jeff, and Aaron. We all went to college together at Washington University. And so Jeff at the time was actually at Palantir. Mm-hmm. So we would get together after work, because Palantir has great food. If any of you guys are familiar with Palantir, it's like amazing. So I would go to Palo Alto after work, and I would go to Palantir, and we would sit and we'd work on a lot of different ideas. Yeah. And Jeff and I have started 3 companies together. This is the only one you guys have heard of, like most entrepreneurs. Yeah. And really, we were sitting down and we were like, okay, what are we both really passionate about? And Black people, okay. What are things that we both really enjoy? Internet, memes, culture, conversations. We're big political people as well. And then creativity is another thing that I think me and my co-founders share in terms of appreciating Black creativity and thinking about how do we take all of those things together and create a platform for ourselves. One of my co-founders, Aaron, is a poet, and he is a poet. He also worked at Bain & Co., so he saw both worlds in terms of being in the corporate America, working on Wall Street, and then being in the poetry community, the spoken word community, where people are full-time artists and creators, and the difference in terms of the amount of money that people can make. And I think, Blavity at its core is about empowering people and figuring out how we can bridge some of that gap and make sure that Black people in America and across the world have access to scale, and they can tell their stories, and they can use the Blavity platform to do that.
Yeah. So for those of the folks who don't know all about Blavity, tell us how you went from having a few different ideas and kicking them around to actually launching your startup. And then tell us, I want you to talk a little bit about how Ferguson played into that entire story.
Yeah, definitely. So Blavity, for those, let me start to where we are today, and then I'll go backwards. So Blavity is a media company. We create content, and we have a platform for Black millennials. So we have our website, our own CMS, and people can submit content, they can submit their stories, and then it goes out through our platform. And then we have our own internal editorial team and production team, create videos and news stories, reports, etc. We also have an events business, so we have 2 conferences, Empower Her and Afrotech. And so that's where we are today. We're one of the biggest, if not probably the biggest, Black millennial website. So in terms of where we definitely weren't there, right? So when Blavity first launched, we were an email newsletter which is a great way to launch something and test really quickly if what you're making is something that people are interested in, because you can track open rates, you can track clicks, you can track shares, etc. So we started as an email newsletter, and then we went on to be a video website, because we really believed in visual storytelling, where the articles and links from the newsletter went to Blavity.com, which was a video site, kind of like a Sophista Ratchet World Star. Yeah, kind of, but not really. So,
but better.
Yeah. We're there now. But so during that time, so we're in the summer of July 2014, right? And so in August, what happened? Mike Brown happened, yep. Right? And I still had my full-time job. Everybody still had their full-time jobs. And I was sitting in my cubicle in San Francisco looking out on Market Street and simultaneously watching like things literally happen in my city, and seeing the disconnect between information, because there was no Netta, there was no D-Ray, like they existed as people, but we didn't know who they were. And so when you wanted to find out what was happening, and you wanted to figure out where do we send the money for the bail bonds, where do we like figure out like who's doing what and where people have gone, there was no place. So we were looking on Vine, we were looking on Twitter, we were looking on Periscope. And even black media companies took a really long time to actually send people on the ground there. And the best like piece of information was actually from someone who was physically there. Mm-hmm. And mainstream media, sensationalized a lot of things, a lot of misinformation, a lot of white gaze. Mm-hmm. And so Blavity, we took it upon ourselves to actually curate huge lists of people that we had vetted and give them access to the Blavity platform, whether that's taking over our Twitter, taking over our Snapchat. And we did that across the country. So we did that in St. Louis, we did it in Baltimore, we did it on college campuses, like when Yale was happening in Mizzou. Yeah. And that's really when I think everybody on our team, our founding team, was like, all right, like, there's no turning back. It's out there. I quit my job prematurely. It was right. Just the right time.
So this isn't a new idea. We've had media platforms, blogs for a really long time. Some of them even have gotten to millions of users. But I think you've been able to do something which is really different, which is make it a business and make it a venture-backable business. Walk me through a little bit about how you did that and how you moved from this newsletter to something that investors could actually be involved in.
Yeah, I mean, thank God we were able to do that. I think there's a few different things. One, I failed multiple times. I failed raising a few different times. So I tried to raise in the spring so we launched 2014. Then, Christmas, et cetera, happened. So spring 2015, I tried to raise, and we had good numbers. The numbers were fine. We weren't making any money because that's what they tell you not to focus on, right? Don't focus on money. Focus on users. Focus on engagement. Focus on shares. Focus on your Facebook following, right?
And so is that true or is it bullshit?
That's bullshit. That's absolutely bullshit. And I'll tell you why in a second. So particularly for us, right, where, I have a black startup with black employees for black people, like, and I'm super, like, I'm a woman. Black. Yeah, like, all these things. Like, no, we need money. Like, we need to have revenue. So got some feedback from investors. I also think I went after the wrong investors at first. I went after people who looked like me because I thought that they could empathize with the problem that I was trying to solve and the pain point that I was trying to solve. And while they could certainly empathize, they could not invest for lots of reasons. And mostly because I think we were really risky for them. And so that, I think, hurt me, right? Because I was like, you guys are supposed to have our backs. Like, you talk all this stuff. You're on all these panels, but, like, where's the check? Hopefully, some of you may feel the same way, right? Yeah. And then when I really opened up to, like, really thinking about, okay, who are the kinds of investors who would maybe give us a little bit more wiggle room and more flexibility to grow the way that we want to grow as a company, and not to necessarily have to be Uber, right? I don't need to be Uber. I don't need to be Airbnb to be an incredibly great investment and a venture-backable investment, right? So once I shifted my mindset in terms of the types of investors that I was willing to go after, we wound up having an amazing set of people come on board. So the Knight Foundation, New Media Ventures, and then and Macro Ventures. And then during our second raise, so I raised around $500,000 the first time, spent most of that money hiring people who were already working really hard but were unpaid. So it didn't necessarily go anywhere. It really was like, hey, everybody move to LA. We're gonna get an office, you get a computer, you have a salary, we have benefits, right? And that I think, but then everybody could work much faster, because we were co-located, and then we actually hired a sales team. So I went against a lot of what my advisors said, and hired a sales team and use that money to reinvest and start to make revenue for the company. So our first year, we spent a lot of time thinking about user growth. Year 2, we thought about revenue. That was the only thing that we focused on. We went from $12,000 in revenue to over $1 million in revenue in a year. And then, thank you for that. That was hard. Come on. Yeah, you guys are.
Yeah.
Come on, guys. So
A lot of money.
I know you've been sitting all day. So what that did, though, was then, one, the investors who gave us a shot when I was making $12,000 in revenue, they were like, it's lit, Riley. They were like, yes, right? So then when I raised our second round, so we went through 500 startups over the last summer, and we were already on track on the revenue standpoint. Our user numbers were okay. They had gone down, actually. And then we graduated from 500 startups, did demo day, and then used all of that energy to then finish up our second round of funding, which totaled, over $1 million in total from our first and our second. And now, we have a lot more room because we focused on revenue and can kind of manage our cash burn better.
So, you just mentioned that you raised over $1 million, and you are one of the few Black women who has raised over $1 million. I think, the report is that it's basically zero because it's a negligible number. But tell me a little bit about what the secret to being able to make that actually happen was. Was there a secret? What are the major keys? Like, how did you do it?
I don't know if there's a secret. I think that it's partially a pipeline situation where it's really difficult to go from 0 to 100, right? That's a first hump that you have to go over, right? Is like going from 0 users to 1 million users, or going from $0 to $1 million in revenue. And I think that's difficult for every entrepreneur, no matter where you are. I think what makes it more difficult for a Black woman is that we just don't have as many, I can't make as many mistakes, right? Like, I have a lot of room to fall. And so for us and for me, and when I say us, I mean my co-founding team, we spent a lot of time thinking about how do we reduce our risk so much that Blavity cannot fail, right? And so that meant doing things like 500 startups where we were pretty big, like we were already doing pretty well, but we wanted to make sure that we had every single possible access that we could need if things didn't go the right way. Has that slowed us down? Probably. Like, if I was a white guy, I mean, I wouldn't be doing this company, but if I were a white guy, would Blavity be a little bit further? Like, maybe. I don't know, right? I think for the Black woman in the room, I think part of it is like not listening to all the statistics, because if you listen to it, like, we literally wouldn't exist.
You would literally not do anything. You wouldn't come out of the house.
For so many reasons. And it's like, so we clearly can't listen to those people because you do exist and you are here and you're sitting in this room, and that already makes you an anomaly on an anomaly on an anomaly. So once I think accepted that we were already going to be a crazy unicorn, that it freed up my mentality. For me, it's mostly a mindset thing.
Yeah. Do you feel immense pressure as, first of all, a Black CEO or a woman CEO to kind of represent and to do well and to make sure that you execute?
I do feel a lot of pressure. I think for me, how it's manifested itself is I've become more of an introvert. So I find myself not going out as much, and I find myself like, even stuff like this. I mean, I love you, so I said yes, but usually I'd be like, nah, because it puts, the more that you put yourself out there, the more that you get, criticized in a lot of ways. And, Blavity is something it's a very personal business, but we represent so much for a lot of people. So, yeah, I think it's a lot of pressure, and I empathize with people like Tristan, who I'm like, you held it down.
He's way out there.
Yeah, and you're still holding it down. And I think that, it is a lot of pressure.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about, so Blavity was kind of born out of this sort of, it's culture, it's memes, but it also has this kind of political background as well. So in this post-inauguration world, what does Blavity mean for people? What are you thinking? What is your plan?
Yeah, man.
What is Blavity's place in the media world now?
It's tough, right? Because we're in a weird place where it's very intersectional, right? So like a lot of Black people, even today, right, with the Women's March, there's a lot of Black women who are like, we're not going, and here's why. And during the campaign, we struggled, I think, to make sure that we had a really strong voice, where we were critical, but then also supportive, because we wanted to be critical of what was happening, but also supportive of saying, well, here's an alternative that we also don't want to happen. And now looking forward in terms of what we're thinking about, I think what we've decided to invest in is making sure that our platform is accessible to other people, and that we moved off WordPress and built our own content management system so that people can share their own stories. And what that will look like eventually as it starts to scale is that you may have two different points of view, where someone's saying, I don't agree with this thing that's coming up, and here's why. And then someone else saying, I agree with this thing, and here's why. And then it causes a conversation. And so I think really Blavity will continue to be this place where you'll hear different types of stories and different types of voices, and particularly in a climate where mainstream is going to continue to skew more to the right. I think it's important that we maintain those places for ourselves. So the other thing we're doing, just out of pure irony, is a political comedy show, because there's a lot of juice.
There's going to be a lot of funny stuff happening.
Yeah, he's giving us a lot of ammo, so we're going to take advantage of it.
Thank you so much, Morgan. Congrats.
For having me.
Yeah.